Let us pray. Oh God, we ask your blessing upon the sons of the American Revolution. Use it, we pray, to open our eyes to thy glory and to the opportunities that lie before us to serve thee and our country. Grant that the leaders of the sons of the American Revolution may be wise and daring. Stir up within us the will to share joyfully in the work of our society. In your holy name, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Tom, will you please lead us in the pledge to the U.S. flag?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mark, would you please lead us in the text of the flag?
I accept my flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one day, under God, one and indivisible.
And the lost, please.
Yes. We, the descendants of the heroes of the American Revolution, who by their sacrifices established the United States of America, reaffirm our faith in the principles of liberty and our constitutional republic, and solemnly pledge ourselves to defend them against every foe.
And Richard, please.
The sons of the American Revolution honors our Revolutionary War patriot ancestors by promoting patriotism, serving our communities, educating and inspiring future generations about the founding principles of our country.
Please be seated. Oh, please, Tom has written this up. It's really a master.
Whatever. It's a little bag. I don't know what the sure. Hey, I'm Bill Taylor, McKinney chapter, in Frisco. My wife Carol's with it, and I keep it so good.
My name is Bill Graham. I'm a member of the McKinney chapter, and member of the code. I had my wife with me to VAR, and then we live in McKinney chapter.
Good evening, I'm Colin, and I live in McKinney. And here's another Pete.
I've got Peter Ford. New chapter. Pete.
Jerry Kenny, McKinney chapter, live in McKinney.
Yeah, Tom Nelson, live here in McKinney. Go this way.
Yeah.
Now Lacey, Kenny chapter from Frisco.
Pat Lacy, Frisco. Carol Wilson, Jenny.
Tom Van Fossen, Dallas, in McKinney, and I live in Flowermound. Anthony Looney, I live in Allen, and I'm a foster.
Good.
Hey.
Paul Reitner, Paul Reitner, in Port Trinity, Dallas County, and I live in Norman. This is my lifetime partner.
We'll be late with that. Mark Harrison, Dallas, McKinney, Dallas County, live in Dallas.
Rich for my part, McKinney Registrar, and my wife Lynn. Boss Review Secretary, and nobody on Zoom tonight yet.
John Greer, I'm in the Dallas chapter and the McKinney chapter, and I live on the banks of Brighton.
You do. She does. I'm Ted Wilson from the Edmund Carroll chapter, and you'll remember here.
Hey, Jim Akers, the McKinney chapter and Denton chapter. This is my wife, Sandy.
Joe Chenoweth, I live in Allen, member of this chapter.
Mark LaPrade, McKinney chapter.
Kimball, and
Just here to tell you some stories.
We love celebration.
And I'm Paul, and I'm with my president of the McKinney chapter, and I have my son with me tonight, Mike.
Yeah, all right.
Going inside the bag, different stuff.
Well, it's my honor tonight to introduce Colin Kimball. Colin, as you're gonna hear in a minute, is a great guy. He sent me his bio and he said, you're welcome to just cut it down all you want to. But I want you to hear it all, okay? Because we're actually, because of what all he does here in this county, we're actually gonna give him a gold, basically a gold medal here. I'm sorry, it's not a gold, it's a bronze. I'm gonna get it. It's a bronze good citizenship medal. Thanks, since I printed that this little while ago. Okay, so here we go. Collin E. Kimball was born in Cambridge, England, the son of an English mother and a career Air Force veteran. Colin Kimball served the United States Air Force in the post-Vietnam era. Upon attaining an honorable discharge from active duty, he used the GI Bill to obtain a bachelor's and master's degree in geology. Have you ever used that for?
I did.
You did for a while, okay. He co-founded the North Texas Fallen Warriors Portrait Project in 2013 and has placed 105 of the local fallen warriors on permanent display and in the Russell D. Is it Russell D. Stein Courthouse, a building in Collin County, Texas, which is named for a Medal of Honor winner from the Vietnam War. An avid historian trained and experienced in the discipline of sequencing events as a genealogist, Kimball also has written and is a writer and storyteller who contributed more than a dozen stories to the book series entitled Beyond Belief, Stories of Heroism that Defy Comprehension. His most recent contributions include a story entitled Courage Wore a Skirt, a recollection recounting of the struggles and bravery of POW wives during Plano's own, POW wives, including Plano's own, the late Shirley Johnson, during the Vietnam War, and the heroes of the men who flew in Operational Tidal Wave, an effort, Army Air Force to destroy the petroleum and resources of Nazi Germany in Pulaski. Okay. Oh, I should do that now. Pulaski during the Second World War. Kimball serves on the Armed Services Memorial Board for the city of McKinney, which maintains our county memorial for the fallen heroes. He has qualified over 60 names on the monument that have been added after its construction, and has personally discovered more than 24 names, some of which go back to the Mexican-American War in 1846. Colin served on the Collin County Historical Commission, where he represented the view of Collin County, Collin County Historical Commission in defense of the statue of the former Governor James Webb Throckmorton, downtown McKinney, advocating for its preservation and against its removal. He also served as an honorary board member on the Herschel Wood Williams Medal of Honor Foundation. Got that right here. As a veteran, Kimball has received the following decorations: the Patrick Henry Medal for Patriotism by the Military Order of World Wars, the Distinguished Citizenship Medal from the Daughters of the American Revolution, and a Congressional veterans commendation from the late, U.S. Congressman and Vietnam War veteran and former POW, Sam Johnson. In addition to his portraits on permanent display in the local courthouse, Kimball's work can be found at the headquarters of the 173rd Airborne Brigade in Vicenza, thank you, Vicenza, Italy. The ROTC building at the University of Texas at Austin, the Sergeant Merlin German Hall Center, in a Wounded Warrior Regiment of Quantico, Virginia, and in the homes of patriots and Gold Star family members nationwide. His current interests are preserving the legacy of our nation's noble warriors by writing in art form and researching and telling the untold stories of the Americans of African descent who helped create the community we live in. So again, we've got a very special person here. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Colin.
I might not be as long-winded as that. I ascribe to the idea that a soldier's never dead until he's forgotten. And my goal is to keep their legacy alive. You'll see in a minute where that inspiration came from. What you see here is a collection of portraits that I've created that have yet to go into the orphanage. So I've got an inventory and I'm constantly working on it. And my partner, I consider myself a co-founder, R.D. Foster, Vietnam veteran Marine from McKinney. He and I started this project together. Unfortunately, he passed away 2 years ago, but he was the writer. We used to do our portrait dedications and he would always proclaim that he was the audio. We'll see if we can do this. Well, this one. There he is here. He was the audio and I was the visual. I missed it terribly, but R.D. was a prolific writer and he wrote books and stories of all the World War I, Korean, and Vietnam. World War II is just so big, he never completed it. So that's really where I'm focusing a lot of my efforts currently. So I'm doing the portrait, and then I'm stopping and writing the stories. And I'll be able to tell you a couple here in a minute. But this is R.D. at our last portrait dedication together. You see the sheriff, see me standing behind him. This particular portrait is really unique. If anybody, do I have any Air Force veterans in the crowd? Well, there used to be an Air Force base in Lubbock, Texas called Reese Air Force Base. This is Augustus Reese, who was from Collin County that the base was named after. So that was a milestone achievement for me to be able to get that portrait. This is a shot, the hallway. When you're coming in, you go to the left, I'm sorry. Incidentally, this is the portrait that began the project right here. I made a mistake when I made the portrait. This was actually framed and ready to go to the courthouse, and we had a little fundraising event. And a Marine came up to me and said, in Vietnam, they didn't wear that type belt buckle, which they do now at that right. So I had to change it. So I pulled it out and now I can carry it around. I have it down in my studio and I get to look at it all the time. But that's Bill Bryant. He and R.D. were best friends growing up. They both went into the Marine Corps together. They both went to boot camp together. And when he came home, or Bill was killed at Quezon, outside of Quezon, at the beginning of that siege. And he was awarded the Navy Cross, which is the highest award for valor that the Marine Corps can bestow. It ranks behind the Medal of Honor, and the difference is the Medal of Honor is bestowed by the President. So whenever you see somebody that has a service cross, they always say it's the second highest, but I like to catch it in terms of it's the highest award that branch can award. At any rate, some 20, 30 years after the war, Marty was at a high school reunion and somebody said, "Where's Bill?" And it was like a gut punch to him. And he said he was killed in Vietnam, you know, darn you for forgetting that. And that motivated him to do the research that ultimately resulted in our Veterans Memorial Park in Craig Ranch. It has some names right now it's about 400, almost 440 men and one woman from Collin County that have died serving our country, going all the way back to the Mexican War in 1846, 1847. So we've since renamed that park in his honor. And this coming fall, we hope to dedicate a memorial marker for him, which will have incorporated in it some sands and soil and rocks from the various battlefields. We've got some Omaha Beach sand, we've got some Iwo Jima sand, we've got a bunch of different rocks and sand samples from Vietnam that he served. Hope to have some from Iraq. We have a couple pieces of the trade towers, but we wanted to put in that memorial some elements of the places where Collin County men have died serving our country. So as far as my motivation, this is kind of an ugly picture. This is my grandfather. He's an Irishman. He served in the British Army during the Second World War. He actually served in the British Army during the Empire and then got out. And then when the war came up, went back in. He was captured by the Japanese. And that picture, he was able to, I guess, pull from files that the Japanese had on them. Because they had to hang around after they were liberated. They had to hang around for a month or two before they could logistically get them back. And of course, that's my mother that you see in that picture. She was from London. And that picture, that's not a dollhouse, that's actually a bomb shelter. And she told stories that she hated going in there. But I came to the realization that had it not been for the Americans, I wouldn't exist. They laid the groundwork that allowed my father and mother to meet some 12 years later after the war. And so the other thing that also started it was the grief that I shared, and this is where R.D. and I bonded, of losing a childhood friend. He was like an older brother to me. This is Frank Lacey. He was in the 26th Marines, Naval Company, 3rd Battalion. He was killed at Quezon, and March 28th, 1968. You know, those numbers and those dates, they never leave you. I was almost 10 years old at the time, and I couldn't bear the idea that people forgot Frankie, and I couldn't bear the idea that they wanted to forget all the guys that fought in Vietnam, including my father, who served in the Air Force in Vietnam after Frankie was killed. So I started this. Those are the things that kind of motivated me to do the work that I do now. This is a picture I'm kind of proud of. This is my son, who is taking his oath of enlistment in the Navy Reserves. He served 4 years in the Marine Corps, got out, went to college, and then at this particular phase of his life, he was waiting to go to the police academy in Dallas. He was actually a Sherman police officer, but he had to go back through the academy again. He's currently serving in Dallas as a police officer, but he wanted to go back in and serve his country as well. So he did his enlistment at the courthouse, and we did it in front of a portrait of Van Stalcup. There's a family connection. I won't go into detail there, but I knew Vance's great nephew, who was a Navy SEAL, who was killed with a top end helicopter down at Extortion 17 back in August of 2011. And my son, we both attended his funeral together. But anyways, we just thought it was symbolic to kind of do his, he wanted to do his enlistment in the courthouse. So we did it in front of the portrait of Van Stalcup. So now I want to talk to you about some of the art that I do. I did a good job on this one, didn't I? This is a photograph, so this is a photograph that I used to base it on. This is Tech Sergeant Mayron Johnson he was from Farmersville. But when he enlisted, he enlisted in Frisco. And so this is the result. I also do a lot of research, and I just finished writing his bio, and it's about 4 pages long. But I was able to find missing aircrew report from when he got shot down. Some of these are just a wealth of information. They're hard to find, but I finally have cracked the code and I can find these now. And from that, I was able to get an accounting of his missions, dates and whatnot. And so he flew 22 missions between November of 43, no, excuse me, December of 43 and June 10th of 1944. And so it's probably hard to see, but 21 B-24s and that 22 B-24s and the portrait symbolically tell that story. On D-Day, there was, can't remember how many aircraft, close to 2,000 bombers that attacked Normandy, and almost it was a complete dud of a mission because it was so overcast. He was tasked with flying against an airfield in Évreux, France, which is about 50 miles west of Paris. And it was overcast, and so it really was an ineffective mission for him. So on the 10th of 4 days later, on the 10th of June, they went back and his plane was shot down. He, the pilot, and one other crew member were killed. A couple of them bailed out and were captured and came back from the war. One died as a Vietnam. There are 10 men on that airplane, but anyways, he was one of 3 that were killed outright. They were buried in a cemetery in this little village, and then after their personal effects were given to the village mayor. And when the war was over, he was repatriated, and he's buried over in the Farmersville area. So doing the research to tell their stories is something that I'm now trying to do. This is a unique one. This is Sergeant J.L. Montgomery. He's only 21 years old. And he served in the 740th Tank Battalion. He was from Cokeville, which is south of Farmersville. And what was unique about him is I discovered there were 4 other men from Collin County that served with him in this small battalion. A tank battalion was about 720 men total. And to have 5 Collin County guys in a regular Army unit together was very rare. For some reason, the Army selected all members of this battalion from Texas and Oklahoma. And then one of the men that served with him, and his name was, did y'all ever know a gentleman up in Salina named Chigger Webster? Chigger was one of the men that served with him. And I had met him in the past, and he's since passed away. I just wish I had discovered this about 5 years ago. At any rate, they missed D-Day altogether. They were still stateside, but they transferred to England in in July after D-Day. And then they trained, and then they landed on Utah Beach on the 1st of November, but they didn't have any tanks. And so they quickly found their way up to a little village in Belgium called Neufchâteau. And they billeted themselves with the people that lived there, brought them in, and they stayed, with these Belgian families. I guess it was on the 16th of December, there was a surprise attack by the German panzers, which began what we call the Battle of the Bulge. And they were racing right straight towards them. They didn't have any tanks, and they quickly were sent to a depot that was about 20 miles away. When they got there, they had some American tanks. When they got there, all the troops that were garrisoned had left, and they had about 2 dozen, tanks that were mostly derelict. They had battle damage, some of them were experimental. And they weren't all tanks, they were tank destroyers. But he and some of the other men quickly cobbled them together, and several days later, they approached this village in Belgium called Stumont, which was the farthest penetration that the Nazi tanks had made. They were superior weapons, they had better armor and whatnot. But because of the training, their training, their commander who fought with Patton in North Africa, he insisted on keeping the hatches open so that they could peek out and see the enemy first and fire first. And that technique worked, and so they basically stopped the German advance at that village and got in a 2-day-long battle there. And that was the farthest that the Germans had penetrated, and then they started pushing them back to the German border. If I can speak military for a minute, I'll quote one of the comments, one of the commanders. Basically said, these are bastard tanks, but we're shooting fools. Sorry, ladies. At any rate, so they then approached the Siegfried Line, which is about a 400-mile series of defenses that the Nazis have built up over the past 4 years. They had these big obstacles there that were designed to prevent vehicular traffic. They were called Dragon's Teeth, and of course they also had armored, fortified gun emplacements. And they had to actually cross the Siegfried Line, probably one of its most heavily defended spots. And of course, they were teamed up with the 82nd Airborne. And the 82nd didn't really want them at first because they thought the tanks would slow them down. But after their companionship and their fighting together, they bonded and they accepted them as their own. And they would later proclaim that the 740th Tank Battalion was the only tank battalion that could keep up with the 82nd Airborne. At any rate, on the 2nd of February, after they had pushed the Germans out of Belgium, they were now trying to cross. He was at 4 o'clock in the morning following some other tanks, and they were getting pummeled from an anti-tank position that was heavily fortified. And he saw where it was, and so he fired off 4 rounds quickly to take it out, and then his gun jammed. He was a platoon commander, so he had, I think, 3 other tanks under his charge. The only thing he could do is he couldn't get on the radio, his radio was out. He climbed out of his tank, he walked over to one of the other tanks, pointed to where the gun was, and literally led him on foot while mortars and artillery are raining all around him. And directed that tank to start firing at that gun emplacement. And on his way back, a round hit and took his life. So he was given a posthumous Silver Star, which is the 3rd highest valor award in our military system. And whenever I do a portrait with somebody that has a Silver Star or higher, I like to put the full medals on. He normally wouldn't have worn that, but to me, it really denotes the nobility of his sacrifice. And he was only 21 years old, and I've since found out he had a brother who was also killed, and so I'm going to start working on his portrait, but I don't know much about him yet, so. This is Almond Sellers. He was from Salina. We're now into the Korean War. I think his family relocated to California because he joined this unit, was part of the California National Guard, the 224th Infantry Regiment. And so this is the portrait that I made. The Korean War, it was, we were unprepared. And early on, we took a lot of casualties, and he was, of course, killed in those opening rounds, I think in the Battle of the Busan Perimeter. Anyway, his brother served with him, and his brother survived the war. And so symbolically, I wanted to put his representation of his brother in the background, looking on to his brother and the ultimate sacrifice. He's only 19 years old. You can look into his eyes, you can see that. This is Dana Webb, not Dana Webb, Dana Mudd. Now, he enlisted from McKinney, but I think he was originally from Illinois. I think he was dating a girl, working for somebody, and was involved in a relationship, because his Purple Heart actually has an inscription and the original mailing address to a building over on Tennessee Street, downtown Florida. At any rate, he was a glider pilot. I used to fly sailplanes back in my younger days, and there's nothing more adrenaline inducing than knowing that once you're up there flying around and chasing birds, you gotta land, and you only have one opportunity to land them. And these guys had only one opportunity to land, but they had to do it when people were shooting at them. And I just had they wore a set of wings that had a key. So he was killed in Operation Market Garden. That was, I think, third big aerial airport assault of the war. And you see his glider wings with the G. They would tell you that stood for guts. The photograph you see was probably the last picture taken of him. He was in a village of Groesbeck, Holland. And their role was, is once they got on the ground, they would then make their way back to the rear, back to England, so they could prepare for the next airborne assault. They were pretty valuable. The training, was unique. They didn't have a lot of these guys, so they weren't designed to sit there. They could fight it out, but their job was to get back. And so on his way back to the rear area, they were ambushed by some Nazis. And this picture was taken of him on the street with 3 other soldiers, and you look into those eyes, it's kind of got that 1,000-yard stare going. It's like he had just seen the elephant. You can really kind of see that in his eyes. So I'm not going to entertain you with the originals, but these are some other ones that I've done that I think are really unique. There was a movie, if I say the movie Go for Broke, is that familiar to you? It's about a group of Japanese Americans that were called Nisei troops that went in to liberate a battalion of Texas National Guardsmen who had been encircled by the Nazis. During the battle, these guardsmen had penetrated into this mountainous area, and the Germans kind of let them in. And then as soon as they got onto the hilltop, they basically closed around, and they found them, and they were under siege for about 3 or 4 days. This Nisei regiment, the 442nd Combat Team, they were composed of Japanese Americans who were literally fighting through that they could be called Americans. And they were led by white officers. And Floyd Earl White from Plano, I think he was a graduate of TCU, was one of those company commanders. Anyway, they fought a protracted battle that lasted several days. And unfortunately, Floyd, he lost his life. There were 800 soldiers from his regiment that were killed to liberate 200 Texans from the 36th Infantry Division. Back when Governor Collin was governor, he made all the Japanese American, the Nisei troops, he made them honorary Texans. And they were also, several years back, given the Congressional Gold Medal for their heroism. They turned out to be the highest decorated regiment in the history of the Army. They have more Medal of Honor recipients came out of that one particular regiment than any other regiment in the history of the Army. And so I thought it was a unique story. If you look closely, those are Japanese Americans and the honor guard behind him. And so you had a Texan leading Japanese Americans to rescue fellow Texans. It's kind of a unique story. this is Jim Furr, I don't wanna leave the Navy out. He was 20 years old, he was from McKinney. He served on the USS Helena. Now this yellow medal that you see here in the middle, that was given to all of service members that were in the military before Pearl Harbor. And the Helena was a brand new ship, it was a light cruiser. And it happened to be at Pearl Harbor when the Japanese attacked. It was there to get modified, and it was actually damaged severely. He was a water tender, which petty officer second class. The Navy has really strange ranks and ratings, and I'm not really good at it, so I use the petty officer up front. But at any rate, his job was below decks, and this was basically for the propulsion system, I guess, to treat the water to make sure it didn't mess things up. And during the Pearl Harbor attack, he was rendered unconscious, and they thought he was dead. And they were able to pull him from below decks, and he was able to recover from his wounds. The gold star you see on his Purple Heart is indicative of having two Purple Hearts. The Navy uses stars, and the Navy and the Marine Corps use stars, the Army and the Air Force use ultimate clusters. But anyways, the Helena recovered, Fur recovered. They went on to fight in the Solomon Islands to provide artillery support for the Marines that were landing, I think, at Guadalcanal. And they were sunk by a Japanese submarine, and of course he lost his life. He was one of the, some of the crew survived, but he unfortunately, about 2,000 foot of water there in the Solomon Islands. This is the oldest person that we have on our wall of honor. John Myers McKinney. He was a cousin to Colin McKinney. His wife had died, and he decided, I guess I'm gonna go to Collin County. I think he had this entrepreneurial idea of hauling wagon farm goods. Collin County in those days was landlocked. We had great agricultural land, but all the crops that were grown here were basically consumed here. They didn't have the ability to get to other markets. So we didn't have a transportation system. Closest place was the Red River up near Denison. So he was gonna start a business of hauling goods up to the landing up in Denison when the Mexican army decided to attack one of the forts down in Brownsville. Santa Anna, whose life had been spared just a few years earlier by Sam Houston. When they negotiated the treaty to end the war, we established the Rio Grande. Well, the Mexicans decided, no, it's gonna be the Oasis River, which is around Corpus. And so they attacked one of the army forts down near Brownsville, and that started the Mexican War. All the federal troops that were in this area were then sent down there, and they were necessary in this area because they were still protecting settlers from the Indian depredations. And so they raised these companies of Texas Rangers on the square at Buckner. Now Buckner is where the current trade days is located. That was the county seat back in 1846. And so men came and they volunteered for 6 months of duty. You had to supply your own horse, and you had to supply your own sidearm. And then they were given some meager pay to serve as a Texas Ranger. And he was in Fitzhugh's company. Again, it was formed down on the square, but because they were federalized by the president, they became essentially soldiers, fighting for America, which is our criteria that we have put their name on the wall. At any rate, he was 65 years old, and he was his group was spread out between Durant, Oklahoma and say Grand Prairie. And they ranged this area again to protect the settlers from the Indians that were taking advantage of all the troops being on. Something happened and a horse fell on it. And He died in, I think, November of 1847, but because they were federalized, he qualified to be put on a wall. I just happened to find a picture of him, and I thought, let's go into the courthouse. You have a question?
Yeah, was he related to Colin?
He was a cousin. This is a unique story. This is Thomas McKnight. Now, he was from Arkansas, but he was the minister at the Methodist Church in Anna. While he was there, he was also in seminary down at SMU. And when the war broke out, he quickly finished his studies, graduated in May 1942, and immediately entered the Army in chaplain corps. He was assigned to the 7th Cavalry Regiment, which is part of the 1st Cavalry Division. That's Custer's old regiment. And sent to El Paso. They said goodbye to the horses. They loaded up on trains, and they went to San Francisco, did some training there. They ultimately headed to the Australia and the Pacific. He was involved as a chaplain in 3 major campaigns and about 4 amphibious assaults. And so one of the things that I love the heraldry in the military. And so when you look at this yellow, that's the Asia Pacific campaign medal. It's denoted the theater he was in. And each one of those stars represents a battle campaign that he was participating in. But down at the very bottom, there's an arrowhead. And that denotes that he participated in amphibious assaults. Those that did amphibious assaults and those that did parachute assaults get to wear an arrowhead coats. At any rate, you've seen the pictures of MacArthur landing in the Philippines. His regiment was, I don't know if it was on that exact beach, but they were in that battle space at the same time. But they were ultimately then sent to Luzon for the Battle of Manila. And the Army imposed some really tough restrictions because they were concerned that the Japanese, as a last-ditch effort, would destroy the infrastructure and the old historic buildings, because there were about 800,000 civilians in Manila at the time, and they wanted to prevent a humanitarian disaster. And so his regiment was actually tasked with securing the water reservoir in mountains and the waterworks that treated that water. And it was while he was posted there that it came under attack by the Japanese. And in the middle of he was assigned to the medical detachment. And in the middle of the engagement, he was one of the soldiers had been exposed out in the open and had been wounded and was crying for help. He left his foxhole and went out to render first aid to that wounded soldier when a mortar landed next to him as well. He also was given a Silver Star for gallantry. And but I just think it's neat if you ever go to that Methodist church, you realize that one of the ministers that preached there is a hero of Collin County. And so I had to put the symbol of the Methodist church in the background to help tell his story. So again, all of these that I just told, that these are new portraits that haven't gone in. I'm going to be putting some more in. Don't know how many yet, but come Veterans Day, and I'll make sure I get the word out. We encourage people to come, but we will be installing some new portraits again in around Veterans Day. But I also want to take this opportunity to talk to you a little bit about another project that I'm trying to kick off. One thing I noticed is a significant part of our population that doesn't really understand the concept of duty. And duty is something that was ingrained in me growing up in the military and serving in the Air Force. And it's part of the job that I do working for the sheriff's office. I have to listen to a lot of ugly stuff in court and do my duty to help defend the victims of various crimes. It's not pleasant work, but it's absolutely necessary. And I had a sister-in-law recently who had jury duty and called me and said, can you get me out? You know, a lot of people up there. I'm like, no, I can't. She goes, well, this isn't fair because I got a trip this week. That week I'm making down to South Texas. I'm taking my stepmother down to visit a relative. I said, Suzanne, you can pick for jury duty. You're not gonna be going on that trip. But it just reinforced the idea that, you know, duty is a concept. And so what I've envisioned doing is I've identified 46 Texans that are from 34 different counties that have earned posthumous medals of honor. And you can kind of see my map, everything that has a green number, or the number represents how many Medal of Honor recipients. If it's green, that means I've completed the portrait. So I've got most of them done. And here's a few examples, and I brought a couple over here as well. But there's one that's not a posthumous recipient, but he's one that I think every Texan should know about. This is Milton Holland. He is the very first Texan to ever earn Medal of Honor. And he was a freed slave. His father was a guy named Bird Holland, who was the Secretary of State. He was a very prominent Texan at the time. And he was the Secretary of State for the Confederate state of Texas. But prior to the Civil War, his brother had a plantation over in the Carthage area. And Bird had a fondness for one of his slaves named Matilda, and he fathered 3 sons, Milton being one of them. We think there were others, but we just know these 3. And when they became teenagers, he purchased them from his brother. He emancipated them and sent them to Ohio to be educated. And while they were in Ohio, Civil War broke out, and he joined the first opportunity he had. He joined the Union Army in the 5th Colored Troop Regiment was what it was called. He was a 20-year-old first sergeant. Those diamonds above his stripes indicate he was the first sergeant. That's a pretty high leadership position in the enlisted ranks. And during the siege of Richmond, he led all the officers who were white were killed, and he rallied the troops and attacked the Confederate positions and routed them, and they won that battle. And he was given the Medal of Honor. His Medal of Honor citation is like 1 sentence. The standard back then was a little bit different, but nonetheless, he's the very first Texan to ever earn a Medal of Honor. I just think that's an interesting fact that people should be aware of. I want to get this portrait in the courthouse in Carthage. This is Mike Pena. I've gotten to know his family. He was actually 16 years old when he joined the Army. Again, before World War II broke out, he loved horses. He grew up down in the Wharton area, and he loved horses and joined the Army so he could be a cavalry soldier. And they, believe it or not, you know, there's been a lot of hay made lately about all the efforts that our government has put on putting troops on the border. Well, the reality is that back between World War I and World War II, we did that then, and that's where they were posted all along the border of Mexico. They had cavalry outposts, and they patrolled and secured the border back in those days. At any rate, he served in the Pacific Theater during the World War II, and then was stationed in Japan with the 1st Cav Division when the Korean War broke out, and was sent to Korea. And during the initial phases, again, which were really brutal for us, we suffered a lot. He kind of did a one-man stand against hordes of North Koreans to protect his troops that were trying to retreat back to safety, and he lost his life and was given a posthumous Medal of Honor. 2 years ago, the governor of Texas awarded the family the Texas Medal of Honor. Believe it or not, Texas has its own Medal of Honor. but it's awarded by the legislator. It's something that the legislature votes on each time in session, and it's awarded to just a handful of recipients, and he was awarded that. So I was invited to the ceremony. I took this portrait down there and wanted to put it on display during the ceremony, but the governor's staff, they said, no, you can't do that, you can't do that. Well, I gave it to his nephew, the one that's holding the medal, and he took it up on stage while they were giving the medal, and then he presented that portrait to the governor. I was like, well, that was my portrait. Anyway, that's supposed to be hanging somewhere in the governor's mansion, so I'm trying to get confirmation of that. But anyway, I'm pretty happy, and of course, the governor was pretty happy to receive it as well. This is Robert Cole. He was from San Antonio. His father was an army doctor, and he was born there in San Antonio. It's always been a big army post. He ended up he enlisted in the army, and then a year later, got an appointment to West Point, and went to West Point. He graduated sometime in the 1930s. He got the Medal of Honor for actions that he completed on D-Day. He charged a German bridge position. They did a bayonet charge, and for that, he was recommended for the Medal of Honor. But you see in the background, prior to the war, he had served with Eisenhower, and they knew each other. And so there's pictures of Eisenhower talking to the troops. So I kind of composed a representation of the two of them shaking hands during that time when Eisenhower was visiting with the troops before they got on their planes to do their parachute assault in Normandy. He survived D-Day. They hadn't actually awarded him the medal yet, but he went on a second mission, Operation Market Garden, which was the one we talked about with the glider pilot, Collin. And during that particular engagement, he was talking to the aircraft, and they needed to mark where they were so that they could figure out where the Americans were and where the Germans were by putting these orange panels out in the field. And so he took it upon himself to go put that panel out to mark their location, and was shot by a German sniper, was killed. What's really the thing that amazes me the most, during the Second World War, paratroopers were prouder of their jump wings than they were of their combat infantrymen badge. This is a coveted medal badge that's given to infantry soldiers who've seen the elephant, that have been in combat. And so nowadays, we wear the CIB, is what we call it, in a superior position above the medals, and they wear the jump wings below. But back in those days, they were more proud of their jump wings. But if you look really closely, the thing that amazes me about this one, there's two bronze stars under those wings. Those signify combat jumps. Not a whole lot of men have ever had the opportunity to earn one, let alone two. This is Robert Law. He's from Fort Worth. He was what they call long range reconnaissance patrols. They called them LRRPs. And they were assigned to different infantry divisions. He was assigned to the 1st Infantry Division, but they were part of what we now call the 75th Ranger Regiment, and they were grandfathered in. And so he actually wore a black beret. That's kind of an unconventional picture with his mustache. But he earned the Medal of Honor in Vietnam. I mean, probably hard to see, but he's kind of got that look in his eye of, I don't know if you're a friend, I don't know if you're an enemy, but I'll kill you if I have to. And then if you look at his arm, it's kind of half cocked, like he's got something in his hand. And I'm like, what's he got in his hand? Is it a gun? Is it a knife? He's just kind of got that look, and that's kind of how I wanted to portray him, but he was from Fort Worth. Killed again on the. This is Frank Mitchell, he was from Mooring Springs, which is up on the. In the panhandle up near the Oklahoma border. He served both in the Second World War and the Korean War. Was the first lieutenant. I can't really speak to the Silver Star or the Bronze Star, which are two high valor awards. But he was given the Medal of Honor for basically defending his making us a one-man charge against an overwhelming enemy force so that his troops under his command could retreat. There's a saying that the Marines guard the gates of heaven. And so I put in yellow the hint of a cross to symbolize what I believe he's doing now. This is my last one, I think I'll show you. This is Candelario Garcia from Corsicana. He was also highly decorated with a Silver Star, a Bronze Star. He was a belated recipient. He was originally given the Distinguished Service Cross. And a review that took place after the war, I think it was, I can't remember if it was when Bush was president or if it was Obama. There were a couple of reviews where they went back to look at citations from people that came from ethnic minority communities and decided, and they looked at his and decided he needed to be upgraded to a Medal of Honor. His nickname was Spider. Yeah. And he actually survived the war. And unfortunately, he passed away the year before he was upgraded to the Medal of Honor. So I'd like to get this one in Corsicana Courthouse. So that concludes my talk. I brought some brochures to talk about the Courthouse Valley project, as I'm trying to call it. And if anybody has some ideas and thoughts or any benefactors, I'm all ears. These are a couple of the Medal of Honor portraits. The portraits that will go in are just a little bit bigger than this. These are 16 by 16s. I designed them to be 20 by 20s. This is Rex Young from Midland, Texas. And in the background is Jerry Cumbus. Jerry's portrait is in the courthouse. Jerry was from Wiley. And they were both killed together in a battle. And what was really unique is when we dedicated our Veterans Memorial in 2011, there were over 20 men from Jerry's regiment that came from all over the country just to be there to see his name on the wall. And that really impacted me. So anyways, if I'm going to tell Rex's story, I'm going to tell a little bit of Jerry's story. And this is Mike Bennett. He's the last Air Force recipient of the Medal of Honor from Vietnam. It was towards the tail end of the war when the Americans were pulling out and turning the war over to the Vietnamese, South Vietnamese. And the South Vietnamese regiment was getting overrun by these invading North Vietnamese up by the DMZ. And so he was flying an observer aircraft that was really designed to locate where the enemy was and put smoke rockets in so that other follow-on aircraft could come in and deliver their ordnance and do the damage. Well, they didn't have any follow-on aircraft, so he took it upon himself to use his miniguns that he had straight, made several gun runs on the North Vietnamese. And one of them pulled out a shoulder-fired missile and fired and hit the engine on the right side. And unfortunately, when that happened, when he called for an eject, guy in the back seat, his name is Mike Brown, he lives down here in Richardson. He was a Marine, flying as a forward observer because he could call in naval gunfire because they were pretty close to shore. He said, I don't have to shoot. So he took it upon himself to head out over the ocean and try to land his the ditch of the OV-10 in the water. He knew quite well that his chances of survival were very minimal because of the way this aircraft was designed. And sure enough, whenever he landed, the impact, he's sitting in the front, took his life, but the cockpit broke in half. And Mike was just able to just undo his seatbelts and swim to the surface, and he survived. So he was given the Medal of Honor for saving the life of his crewman. And so I met Mike. There's another version of this portrait that's in the Frontiers of Flight Museum that has Mike's likeness in the background. And his daughter, Angela Bennett Engel, lives over here in Louisville. We become good friends. So this he is from I think Palestine, Texas. That's where he was born. Now his family moved. I guess they were New Orleans, and they moved to South Louisiana. So he grew up mostly in Lafayette. So, at any rate, that concludes. I hope I didn't go too long on this. I really appreciate the opportunity. This project, as I said earlier, I suffered from feelings of anger and frustration from losing a friend in Vietnam. But now that I do these portraits, Frankie's a part of every one of these, and I don't feel that. So, thank you for listening.
Any questions?
Yes, sir.
When you're aware that the first president of the Texas Society turned to the our ordinance was recipient of the festival.
What was it?
Our Evans,
Evans? No, I was not aware of that.
he was from Vermont. He was in the Civil War. He was the right banner of the fight.
Okay,
Fight for
that's the way they did it back in those days. Right.
Good. Any other questions?
Okay, Colin. So, on your website, are all the locations of your paintings listed also?
No, I don't have a website per se. It's one of those things that I don't want people copying them and putting them and then marking, so I haven't quite figured out a way to lock them down. I don't mind sharing them with family and friends and whatnot, but I get criticized all the time from the Gold Star mothers. You know, where's the website? And I'm so busy. If I'm not painting portraits and writing.
Did you do the Audie Murphy painting?
No,
No.
but that was an inspiration
Okay.
that started. I had, like I said, I came back, I had jury duty and I went up there, the courthouse was brand new, and I saw that portrait and I saw that wall space. And I had this portrait already done.
Card right there.
And so RD and I both called Judge Self, or RD called him because he knew it better than I did. And said, hey, we'd like to do a nonprofit, raise money, put these portraits in. And he embraced it. So he's now our congressman. And when I talk about myself being a co-founder, I always refer to him also as a co-founder because he embraced this project from the get-go and made things happen. And we're both big fans of each other.
The others? Okay, so I read that whole file that you said. Because I wanted to be sure these people knew what you've done. And so what we'd like to present you with at this point in time is the Blonde's Good Citizenship Medal. And it's basically the highest level that we can provide at the chapter level without state approval. So anyway, so we had that put up. Here's a picture of the medal again. And again, it's in recognition of notable services on behalf of our American principles. And I don't know how you can't tell if he hasn't done notable service on behalf of our American principles, which is taking care of and remembering our veterans, which is one of the things we do. So
Thank you
if
very
you
much.
look over here, the cameraman.
I'm quite honored.
Okay. And for any of y'all that haven't seen it, over here. It's not that far over here. There's no excuse. If you haven't seen it, go see it. It's quite something to see. And,
I work next door to jail.
It's
One whole day.
the case.
So if you have a time you wanna go over there and get a little guided tour, there's my email on there, send me an email and I will endeavor to make some time. I spend a lot of time over there anyway, but I'll be more than happy to.
What are you doing the next,
We will do it usually sometime during the week around Veterans Day.
on Veterans Day, okay? And then the picture is that the one that you're gonna, next one you're gonna, one that I put with the email?
I might, I've got a committee of
Oh, you gotta get,
my committee's
You gotta
got to
get- you gotta-
but no, I think that would be a good one. That particular one that went out on the newsletter, his name is Charles Bickley. And I just discovered him back around Memorial Day, actually. There's a website in Holland called Fields of Honor, and it honors all of the Americans that are buried in the cemeteries over in Europe. And they have a database and it's searchable, so I go there periodically and I put in Collin County. And I usually get about 35, 40 hits. And I went through and all of a sudden I saw it and I'm like, yeah, I know him, I'm like, who's this guy? Charles Bickley. And it said he was from Collin County, but he entered the military, he entered the service in Virginia. And so my wife is a avid genealogist. I was saying we've been married for almost 40 years. And the whole time we've been married, even before we were married, she'd always been trying to get into the DAR. And she has several lines that she can point to, but she can't get the proof. And we worked with the local chapters of the DAR at any rate, but she's still a big genealogist. Matter of fact, Mark and her are cousins. Where that line.
Okay.
She's got the craw in the family.
Okay.
And I've talked to your dad about the lineage, but at any rate, anyways, I went through there and on the ancestry, what happened was his father was the mayor of Farmersville in 1919, and Charles was 5 years old. Well, his father caught the Spanish flu and died. And the mom was from Virginia, so she just took the kids and went back home to Virginia. And that's how we discovered them. So I found, we have to have, proof of Collin County lineage, that, came from Collin County and that he was killed in the war. So I found an old picture of him and I was able to make that portrait. So I think that would be a good one.
Yeah, well, that would be.
He was killed in the Battle of the Bulge. In a horrible battle. His unit was isolated in a little village. And I think every single building in that village was destroyed during the battle. The Germans went in after him, took flamethrowers and went in after him. Don't know the exact circumstances of his death, but he survived like a week-long battle and was killed towards the end of that siege. But at any rate.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks.
New business? Thank you, Colin. Thank you. Very good. Is there any new business? We have a sub-bullet National Color Guard Medal Awards. So I think Tom gets one and also
Bob didn't make it.
Bob didn't make it.
Try to make it.
Okay. Well, we do have the award for you, Tom. There you go.
Thank you. Well, there we go.
And
Here, I'll get it.
Bill will probably take pictures of that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Bob, that didn't make it tonight. We started the project at the same time,
Bob's Color Guard.
Yep. So
Congratulations.
anyway, both of us, like I said, we took it on, we had a race run, of course, he beat me. But it was good. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Let's see, old business or announcements. Do we have any announcements from the floor? Okay. And old business, America 250 DAR event certificates.
Yep. Okay, we gave some of these last time. Again, that's basically when the DAR had their that traveling exhibit over here and everybody, a lot of people stood up and said, okay, I'll do 3 hours. And as a result of that, over a 6-week period, every time the doors were open, we had an SAR member from multiple chapters, but SAR member there, basically being a co-host. So really appreciate that. So I think we gave out some of these last time, but thought I would continue on until I give out that. Well, let's see, he's not here. Kerry Barnett, he was gonna come, but he was not able, so Richard Bonaparte. That's, he's Bill Graham. Bill?
Take a picture.
Okay. Oh, we got, why don't we get them all here?
Well, you want to do them all together?
Yeah, why don't we do? Speed it up a little bit.
Bill Brown. There you go, Bill.
Mark Cancer's not here. Well, no, he's not here. Martin, no, Mark's been sick and he was gonna try to fix it out. Nathan White, we'll get him next time, okay? And. Oh, God, so I guess. I think that's it for this go around anyway. So now we have a picture.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
The next meeting is September 18th. And you can take a look at the upcoming events on the back panel of the brochure. I see an October tentative trip to the Medal of Honor Museum in Arlington. Anyone have any insight into that event?
Pete, I think Pete does, but I think we're gonna see what we can do about doing something joint, right?
Yeah, we're still pursuing the visit to the Medal of Honor Museum down in Arlington. And we should have more information next month, but I'm gonna be talking with Tom Van Fossen about us combining the trip with the Dallas trip. So we could have quite a turnout and maybe we can improve on the group discount. Accumulate more people.
Okay, well, good, good. So we'll just wait for further details.
Could be a meeting with Tom after our meeting.
Okay.
And we'll refine our strategy.
Okay. All right, and July minutes, I believe they were probably sent out through the email. We have any discussion on them? Anyone want to propose to accept them? Do we have a motion?
Yes, who's it?
Do we have two? Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye. Anyone want to dissent? Okay. Hearing none, thank you. I'm glad Pete reminds me of that. Okay. Treasurer's report, did you figure?
Let's see. All right, so here's the treasurer's report for tonight's meeting. Chapter's funds at our last meeting were $9,396.05. Expenses this month were $18.98 to reimbursement to the registrar for paper. We received $370 this month for bond veterans. That'll be earmarked and no writing for that funding. Chapter available funds are currently at $9,747.07. This amount does not include those funds already allocated for project 2026, which amounts to $1,860. Any questions? Hearing none.
Any other announcements or other business? Once again, thank you, Colin.
Thank you.
Let's stand for the benediction. Let us pray. Grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God the Father, and the fellowship of the Holy Ghost be with us now and forevermore. Amen. Our meeting is adjourned.
Oh, good.
Recession.
There it is.
Didn't think about it. Yeah, oh yeah, until we meet again. Just remember our obligations to our forefathers. Today, President, on Tuesday, the building of the house is a good Supreme Court. And nation of free man. You don't know, where do you?
Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Lots.
Thank you. Good recovery. That was good.
Yeah, I'll keep it on.